So when we think about determining the runtime for UPS, one thing that you want to consider is that the whole reason why you have a UPS is for insurance. You're trying to protect yourself against those short power outages. You want to make sure your equipment doesn't get damaged by spikes and surges. You just want to make sure that you have time for a graceful shutdown if you've got actual servers and computers connected to this UPS. So that's really the mindset that you have to go into selecting the runtime for UPS. So when you think about insurance, you can get a cheap policy that is just to cover the major catastrophes, and you won't have to pay very much for it. Or you can get a very comprehensive policy that may be more expensive but leaves you with very little risk. It's the same thing when it comes to selecting UPS runtime. If you go with the low end, you may just be trying to protect yourself against the short blips that represent about 93 to 95% of power outages. When I was with APC, that's the numbers that we used typically from a statistical standpoint, is that over 93% of the outages that you'll experience are less than 2 minutes. So that's a pretty good chunk of the outages. Then we would say that an additional 5% of those outages are greater than 2 hours. Somebody hit a telephone pole or some major disaster has happened, and there's not going to be power restored for quite a while because some infrastructure is going to have to be restored. So all you have left there is about 2 or 3% of outages that range from greater than 2 minutes to less than 2 hours. So you have to think about, and this is a common range where people will select that, hey, I want an hour's worth of runtime, or I want 2 hours worth of runtime on this UPS. So but what they're really protecting is a very, very small percentage of those outages. So is it worth the investment in additional batteries and possibly a larger UPS to cover that extremely small percentage of outages? You have to make that decision. Sometimes it is critical that you cover yourself on that. If you have a generator in play, you're really only trying to protect yourself for a few seconds, hopefully. If your generator is well tested on a regular basis so that you know that it's going to start on a consistent basis, then you're really only trying to cover a very, very short blip. But you may need to, as a backup, have the ability to let that UPS gracefully shut down your equipment. Once again, the network management card is critical to that function, as I've referred to in my other video. Finally, if you are going to provide some extended runtime for the equipment, you have to take into consideration heat. The network equipment, the servers, everything that you keep on running is going to continue to fill that room with heat. And if you have a power outage and there's no air conditioning and cooling to that room, then you may actually reach the thermal limit of where that equipment can operate before you ever run out of battery. So you have to do some calculations on that, and I really recommend getting a professional involved to help you make that determination about how long that you can physically run the equipment based on thermal considerations. So those are the major considerations for determining runtime on your network UPS.